Ashama kun sagalee bridge reality garee Samu'eel Birhaanuti. Manni jireenya ala namaaf ni barbaachisa. Inni kuni garuu jireenya tulbuu horee yaada namaa boqochiisa. Gaaddisa aara galfii ta'ee jiraachuuf nama sassachiisa. Maarree isinis kan akkanaa bitachuu yoo feetan akkasumas kan ofii qabdan gurgurtanii bu'a qabeessa ta'uun gara xiqqaatti yookaan gara guddaatti jijjiirrachuu yoo barbaaddan dafaa mariisisaa. Bridge reality Tora bilbila keenya torba ja'a sadii torba afur afur saddeet sadii ja'a lamarratti nuuf bilbila. Bridge reality garee Samu'eel Birhaanuti.
Wow. Again, Milkessa, I really want to honor and acknowledge you for sharing such a detailed response. Again, very revealing. I can only imagine what those few years must have been like for yourself and people like you who had entered into that movement or that time or that institution with the intention of using it for good and coming across the kind of roadblocks that you are. Roadblocks is a soft word to use, but kind of challenges that you're describing. In light of all of this, as we know, the Ethiopian government and the Oromo Liberation Army sat for peace talks of what were being called the first round of peace talks. This was at the end of April, beginning of May. From what you have said in terms of the intentions, the frameworks and foundations that were put in place at the beginning of Abiy's tenure, and generally from your analysis, what kind of mentality do you think that the Ethiopian government went into these peace talks with? And do you think that a second round is likely? If yes, why? If no, why not?
Negotiations are necessary for Ethiopia. Peace is necessary. It is the foundation of everything. Without peace, particularly for Ethiopia, a home to diverse communities and peoples, peace is necessary. It's a precondition. So when I heard about this planned negotiation between the Ethiopian government and the Oromo Liberation Army, I was I should be happy. And I was happy, but I know the political dreams of Abiy. It is unfortunate that Abiy sees Oromia as a kind of private farmland of that he can play anytime, free of any controversy. So Abiy sees Oromia as kind of his private home, or that no one can share. As a result, he doesn't like to talk about any negotiation in Oromia. He doesn't like to see even negotiating with OLA is necessary. But Abiy is, as far as I know, Abiy could not negotiate with Lama and me. We were part of his government. Honestly, he can negotiate with Lama, but he was unable to do so. From that point of view, and from my experience working in government under his tenure, what I understand is, the mentality that you mentioned, I might have at the time was, Abiy wants the drama. Kind of, he likes, political theater, drama. And he needs that for political gain and political interests. And at the same time, there is an international pressure on Abiy to settle, the war that he is conducting in Ethiopia, including in Oromia. There is pressure from the side of international community, including the United States government. There's pressure on Abiy to end violent conflicts in Ethiopia. That is very no what we demand. Conflict should end in Ethiopia. So because of this pressure, and also because he thinks that he can benefit from making that public, making a public announcement that he's going to negotiate with OLA, then he creates a kind of public opinion, dividing public opinion, so that Abiy is a man of negotiation, and his government is willing to sit for any kind of negotiation that can transform the country. So he calculates, as far as I know. And in the world of Abiy's government, there is no negotiated peace. Abiy, unless Abiy wins. So if you remember when the negotiation, the Tigray Ethiopia negotiation happened in Pretoria and then in Nairobi, then in the first round of negotiation of Pretoria agreement, Abiy came out publicly saying that what we proposed were accepted 100%. We are the winner, he said. How on earth the prime minister of that country says, we won 100%, what we proposed were accepted, and then that is, in political science, we call that victor's peace, an authoritarian type of peace deal imposed upon the defeated party. He admitted that. He tweeted that to the public. What we said, 100% accepted, and what they said, 100% rejected. Meaning that this is completely, unacceptable. I mean, in the eyes of any average person, it doesn't need kind of knowledge. But anyways, uh, in Abiy's mind, what he needs is to impose his idea, his rule on Tigray, on Oromia, without any negotiation. But there was negotiation in name, but that negotiation is not negotiation in reality, and therefore the kind of peace negotiation that I was watching Ethiopian state-owned TV station after following the negotiation in Tigray, and they said they many of them are my former colleagues in the party and in the government. They said we're gonna repeat the victory that we scored in Tigray in Oromia. So they are going to repeat what their victory in Tigray in Oromia against the OLA. So they were preaching that kind of war propaganda. Yeah, and then I say, these people are not healthy. Um, so once you negotiate, at least the Tigray negotiation was we know the Tigray people suffered a lot from international intervention from Eritrea, all the way from Amhara forces, from Ethiopia's armed forces. Tigrayans, they suffered. You know, the damage that these coalition of forces committed against them, it cannot be comprehended in a word. So any peace deal is necessary for Tigray. So they have to accept, and they have to get something to eat. I understand the context that the grants are in. The context in Oromia is completely different. So, so Abiy is not ready to deliver the kind of peace deal that the public is pushing for. So, if you ask me my thoughts about if the possibility of the second round or whatever kind of peace deal that can end the violence and conflict in Oromia, uh, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, uh, uh, that that will not gonna happen in Oromia because Abiy is not willing.
Thank you for that. Okay, so again, really insightful, really rich analysis. Just quickly, when you mentioned that there was this attempt to see force Tigray into this victor's peace deal. I think that was the word that you used. Would you say that the intensification of violence in Oromia, offensive by the government, right after that first round, was the attempt to do, as you're saying, repeat what happened in Tigray, even if the analysis is wrong on the side of the government? Were they trying to do the same thing, force hands by attacking civilians to take whatever the government puts down in terms of a peace deal?
Look, Sorati, um, Abiy's government had the mentality of defeating everything and is imposing his government, across Ethiopia. So no opposition, no dissent voices allowed. Um, so what they think is they can defeat whatever happening in Oromia, but the war in Oromia started way ahead of Tigray's war
Mhm.
because it started while I was in government in Ethiopia. After, even precisely, the war in Tigray happened after they damaged a lot of things in Oromia. So the war in Oromia led to the war in Tigray for me, and as far as I know. Once Abiy was happy about what happened in Oromia, no potential force can that can push Abiy from power could happen in Oromia. Once he's sure that he has kind of controlled, quote unquote, control everything in Oromia, he started the war in Tigray in November 2020. So once, I mean, again, Abiy was disinterested to end the war in Tigray, but there was international pressure on him to end the war in Tigray. There was massive pressure. He couldn't, withstand those pressures from international community, from all organizations, that international organizations. Um, so with that, um, once Abiy stopped the war in Tigray, his clients of what I call Ethiopian nationalists, who are who are against self rule in Ethiopia, who are against minorities' rights, marginalized communities, and who are they are against any form of federal arrangement that goes along linguistic line. They are major clients of Abiy, and they have a kind of symbiotic relationship with them. So largely they come from Amhara elites, and as a result, once Abiy stopped the war in Tigray, then these clients were unhappy. So they have to find somewhere to continue the war. And Abiy, because Abiy was not forced to stop the war in Oromia, so yeah, he can continue the war in Oromia and repeat the victory that he scored in Tigray. With that, he invited what happened in Tigray happened in Oromia, particularly the Amhara paramilitaries intervened in Oromia and they joined the national army and committed heinous, kind of devastating crimes. And in Oromia, you might have seen a lot of graphic videos, a lot of so that was centrally commanded, unified given unified leadership from the center. So I don't see any kind of difference between, in terms of the central government's plan towards Oromia. It was the plan that they executed in Tigray.
Yeah. Thank you again. And you have very appropriately brought us to the last point of our discussion when you mentioned here this symbiotic relationship between certain elites. And you mentioned here that they are majorly from the Amhara ethnicity. Of the last few years, but particularly over the last 6 months, we've seen this intensification of attacks in Oromia by Fano militia, this Amhara militia, been crossing the border and committing a whole range of atrocities. In the Team Free Oromia actually also mentioned that on the occasions that you're aware of where Oromia regional forces had tried to protect civilians from Fano militia, they had been attacked in turn by Ethiopian federal forces. And we've actually been seeing this trend even in the last couple of days with the displacement of residents from the Kiramu district in East Walaga, as they have sought refuge in other parts of East Walaga as regional authorities or regional police have gone to this. There was a case whereby 4 regional authorities went by to try to tend to the needs of this displaced population, but then were in turn attacked by security forces, beaten, and then arrested. So there is a collusion here at work, and you've started to speak to this. Can you say more about what this symbiosis between Abiy's government, Abiy himself, and the Amhara elite are in Ethiopia, both at a practical, logistical level, but also at an ideological level?
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting issue that developed in Ethiopia. Um, so Abiy came to power as a result of the youth movement in Oromia and partly the youth movement in Amhara, also in Gondar and some part of Amhara. So mainly, but Abiy came to power with a youth movement that happened across Oromia. He used that opportunity to become the prime minister of Ethiopia. But Abiy disregarded the youth movement's demand in Ethiopia. The Oromo youth movement is they were largely civil society and non-violent. Uh, their demands were mainly about democratic transformation, transition. There are specific questions of language policy issues, particularly the federal government of Ethiopia continued to reject the demand on the side of the Oromo to make the Oromo language as part of the federal government official language. So Abiy is unwilling to do so, even though the Oromo language is the largest mother tongue in Ethiopia. The Oromo language remain, at the bay of marginalized in Ethiopia. So and also there are a lot of questions as far as the capital city of Ethiopia is concerned. The Oromo continue to have their demand in Finfinne, in Addis Ababa. Um, uh, I can mention a lot of questions that were mentioned, as part of the banners of the Oromo youth movement. Um, so once he controlled the state power, Abiy, tried to change uh, from Oromia to kind of, in his mind, Ethiopian nationalism. So this nationalism that Abiy wants to, ride was a kind of ready-made, uh, comfortable for him to ride as he wants to, become king in Ethiopia. Kind of seen uh, seventh king or dictator in precise word. Um, um, so he changed it into Ethiopian nationalism that he wants to drive. Um, in this Ethiopian nationalism, as we all know, Ethiopian nationalists are they are against regional autonomy. They are against any diversity. They are against any linguistic based federal arrangement. They are against any historical, distinctiveness that we have in Ethiopia. They want to impose kind of a centralized historical narrative that glorifies the past, glorifies the achievement of one sector of society in Ethiopia by marginalizing and misrecognizing the identities of other, histories of other. So according to these Ethiopianists or Ethiopian nationalists, you know 80% or 75% of Ethiopian, or 80%, I can say 80% of Ethiopian population do not have history, do not have culture, they do not have language, they do not belong to Ethiopia according to them. So they give a kind of second class citizenship for the large mass of Ethiopia by making imposing upon them kind of identity that they want to create. So this nationalism who misrecognize, uh, you know, the rest of the country, particularly the broader South, what we call broader South. So they are against any identity that they are against diversity. So Abiy joined them because he Abiy thinks that they can ride him smoothly. um, so for the temporary alliance, a kind of a short-lived kind of love-hate type of relationship that they established, uh, made this kind of symbiotic relationship where one benefit from the other, and they cooperate. They created a kind of partnership, for example, to invade Tigray, to commit the crimes that happened in Tigray. They both, Abiy government and Ethiopian nationalists, who are mainly Amhara elites, particularly, they joined hand in hand to crush what happened. I mean, to crush Oromo nationalists or Oromo democratic forces. They see Oromo forces as evil, and they depict Oromo as, alien, foreign. So this is unhealthy. This doesn't help Ethiopia. So Abiy joined them, and for in order to get benefits, because much of these Ethiopian nationalists are urban-based elites. They own media institutions, they own the economy, they dominate the bureaucracy. In Ethiopia, they, in fact, they are dominant in international, system that we have. I mean, particularly in relation to other elites in Ethiopia. These Ethiopian nationalists are, many, because they are beneficiaries of the previous regimes in Ethiopia. So Abiy allied with them with the hope that he would continue getting the support that he needs to attack any opponents, attack any dissenting voice in Ethiopia, and invade Oromia, invade Tigray. So they helped him do whatever he likes, including the establishment of the Prosperity Party. They helped him, and Abiy was happy introducing his new personal political belief as a political program of the party of Prosperity Party. So they were having kind of alliance, kind of benefiting from. So Abiy get benefit from them because he wants to be seen as a king, and they liked that style. So they don't question whether you are king or emperor or Nubusa Nagast or Minilik or whatever. They love you. So But what they demand is you have to meet their uh, certain political ideology that glorifies the past and undermines the rights of communities in Ethiopia. And so, in that sense, ideological beneficiaries are Ethiopian nationalists, mainly, those who see themselves as the real, genuine, true representative of Ethiopia. Those who consider themselves more Ethiopian than me, they became friends of Abiy, and because I was less Ethiopian for them, they give this license to kind of. Anyways, Abiy chose them, and then because of this ideological symbiotic relationship between Abiy and the Ethiopian nationalists, a lot of mess, a lot of crisis happened in Ethiopia against Tigray, against Oromia, and against other communities, marginalized communities in Ethiopia. So this symbiotic symbiotic relationship um, is being a kind of endangered now. Uh, it has become, it is a love-hate relationship. They love each other because they share the same ideological, predisposition and vision. Because Abiy also wants to dismantle the current federal arrangement and then impose the type of structure that he envisions to see in Ethiopia. So they are happy with this. There is still love between them, but they hate each other on because Abiy has stopped now the war in Tigray.
Mm.
So he was supposed to continue, according to Ethiopian nationalists and Amhara elites, particularly.
Mm.
So because Abiy stopped the war in Tigray, so their relationship is a kind of partly love, partly hate, but still the war in Tigray, the war in Oromia gives the kind of love relationship between the Ethiopian nationalists and Abiy. So in general, Abiy is, as far as I know him, Abiy is willing to form any kind of short-lived alliance with anybody, including Isaias Afewerki, and if there are any creatures that he has to consult, Abiy is ready to do that in the whole of Africa and beyond. So, what is happening in Oromia against the Oromo people by the neighboring Amhara paramilitaries is not surprising. uh, it started, 10 kilometers from Addis Ababa, northeast of Addis Ababa, where I know the place is called district of Kimbibit, Shano town, where the Amhara special forces occupied 280, I'm correct, I think, hectares of land. And still today they are, occupying that territory just 10 kilometers from the capital city. No one responded. And so if it happened in Kramu, in Horoguduru, Jadaga Jarte, or Karayu, it's not surprising, and it will continue to happen as long as
Mm.
Abiy is there in the palace.
Let me ask you finally, Milkessa, as we bring this really, again, revealing, insightful, fruitful discussion to an end, what would you propose as a solution to this multifaceted crisis that the country is facing? If you had the opportunity to lay down a plan and implement it, what would you do in the near future and perhaps the long term?
This is very difficult questions already. But I wish peace and democracy, come back to Ethiopia and Oromia. Um, that that may not happen as far as the vision to establish authoritarian regime in Ethiopia exists in the palace in Ethiopia. But what I recommend is number one for the Ethiopian people, you know, to unite. And unless Ethiopians recognize each other, respect each other, and unite for common purpose, unless they unite, nothing will happen. I mean, the crisis will not gonna end. Um, so number one is about unity that we're not seeing. You know, Abiy has devastated every social fabric that we know in Ethiopia. Everything is destroyed now. Mistrust is instilled. Everywhere people suspect each other. But people should go beyond that and see beyond the horizon to vision and envision a kind of unity so that their vision of democracy may come true one day. Number one is unity in Oromia, among the Oromo, among the Ethiopian peoples. You know, unity is necessary from the public. For from the international community, you know, I don't hear any support for democracy, any support for civil society. You know, people are, you know, I don't know. In fact, in the state of war, people prioritize, you know, any kind of peace, whether it is victor's peace. You know, I sense. I mean, it is logical to expect people prioritizing peace over democracy. But democracy, Ethiopia has never been democracy. I mean, as far as the history of Ethiopia is concerned, the Oromo has, I mean, has its own Gada system, which is democratic. But once it was incorporated into the empire of Ethiopia, you know, it lived and continued to live under a state of terror. So Ethiopia, the empire, a kind of now federal system, uh, has never been democratic. So, you know, before rushing to dismantle federal structure, um, international community should give priority for democracy first. People should enjoy, I mean, start to enjoy democracy before their fate is determined by one single, you know, party state. In Ethiopia, the party, the ruling party and the government is one and the same. If you are a member of the party, I mean, if you, bureaucracy is not neutral, the court is expected to be member of the ruling party. You know, the police is not neutral; they are member of the prosperity party. With, you know, in such situation, it is it is devastating for the nation, for the country, to propose a kind of new fit arrangement for the benefit of one man rule. I mean, you know, international community should redirect their attention to democracy and civil society first. You know, unless we have democracy and free election, it is difficult to think about peace. So, well, yeah, violence should stop, conflict should stop, and then democracy should be given, you know, at least equal weight with conflict, I mean, peace. You know, democracy is part of peace, yes, but I don't see democracy and civil society and human right being prioritized. I don't see this from international community. And you know, for the government of Ethiopia, including my former prime minister, um, if he, you know, decide he can make history, he can make history, but I know he loves power at any cost. He loves power. He wants to die in the palace. But I advise him, you know, he can be, you know, well-known person, respected person in history if he is willing to do and make history. He can make that. He can decide that. But that needs courage, commitment to democracy, human rights. He has to stop lying. He has to, uh, he is well known by gaslighting people. But he has to stop that. And, we can encourage him so that he can be, victorious. He can be a victorious person by, you know, creating a kind of peaceful Ethiopia, peaceful Oromia. Once he has that in his mind, he can call anybody and let us have something different. He is there. He is powerful, and he can do that. And if he decide to create, you know, genuine negotiation, genuine transformation of state-society relation, but this is the alternative that we have. At any cost, Ethiopian people deserve peace. They deserve democracy and human right protection. They deserve respect and unity, not division and killing each other. Violence doesn't serve anybody on earth. So whether it is in Tigray, in Command, in Benshangul Gumuz, in Gambela, in Wallo, in Oromia, in Somalia or in Somali, everywhere in Amhara, unity and mutual respect, fighting for democracy, non-violence is a critical thing for me.
Thank you again, Milkessa. I've thanked you a number of times throughout this interview because at each point you've shared so abundantly and generously and really courageously about your experiences and also your analysis as somebody who has not only been watching this crisis unfold as an invested person, being part of the communities affected, but also as someone who has studied in this field and is also understanding it and watching it from that perspective. So, really from all perspectives, I'm really grateful that you made the time to be on the show today. And again, thank you for your courage.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed your questions. Thank you.
Well, everybody, I don't have much to say after that. I think that it really speaks for itself. As I mentioned at one point in that interview, I really hope that the experiences and insights that Milkessa Gemechu has shared with us here from being part of the government in Ethiopia, I hope that these insights really put to rest that this is not a challenge really of what ethnicity is leading Ethiopia, but this is a matter of political visions and how they are enforced, whether through processes of democracy and collaboration with people, or whether through state violence, and that really it's a difference between these approaches that is leading Ethiopia down in the track that we have been seeing over the last 5 years. Again, that was Milkessa Gemechu, an assistant professor at Abiy College, and also a senior official, an ex-senior official of the Ethiopian government. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Soriti Kidia. You're watching the Oromia Media Network, and I'll see you next time.
حواس أرمو كندا مقالا إدمنتني في نانو سيجرات تمارا
Hawaasni Oromoo biyya Kanadaa magaalaa Edmonton jiraatu koree qindeessituu deeggarsa uummataa OMN wajjin ta'uun
وتبجي دقدمي أفر برك ولا ما في دقدمي سدي قافة يا سنبت درا واري بودم ساعتي لما الرا إيقلون هنگ ساعتي سقلي سقنتا تمس OMN في مري حواسا قبيسون إسنا فرني جرو
Maarree hawaasni Oromoo magaalaa Edmontanii fi naannawa ishee jiraattan martuu sagantaa kanarratti akka hirmaattaniif waamichi dhiyaateeti jira.
تم سريك غير سورميا ميدياني تو يا كندا مقالا إدمنتن أدى argatan taasisu.
Maatiin Oromiyaa miidiyaa neetwork baay'inaan irratti argamuuf qophii xumuruu isaaniiti.
Maatiin OMN Daayireektar Olaanaa OMN Dajanee Guutamaatiin durfamu.
Teeknishaana OMN Abdii Jamaal.
Gaazexeessaa Usmaan Baayyuu.
Gaazexeessituu Faayizaa Iliyaas.
Gaazexeessituu Na'imaa Umar.
Gaazexeessaa Usmaan Abdulaxiifii fi keessummoonni biroo sagantaa kanarratti ni argamu.
Teessoon Central Leons Recreation Center 11113 Street Edmonton ABT 5G0EG akka ta'e.
Koreen qindeessituu deeggarsa uummataa OMN beeksisee jira.
Odeeffannoo dabalataatiif lakkoofsa bilbilaa kanneeniin koree qindeessituu sagantichaa qunnamuu dandeessu.
178 Duwwaa 2 Duwwaa Duwwaa 154
158 Duwwaa 721
dhimma Oromoo fi Oromiyaa irratti waloon haa mari'annu.
Anis
Atis
cufti keenyaahu
OMN tumsuudhaan
qabsoo saba Oromoo haa tumsu.
koree qindeessituu sagantichaa Edmonton, Albertaa, Kanaadaa.
Fagoota OMN dhokata fagoota OMN.
Hawaasa Oromoo Ameerikaa kutaa bulchiinsa Siyaatil jiraatan mara.
Hawaasni Oromoo Ameerikaa kutaa bulchiinsa Siyaatil adoolessa 8 bara 2023 waaree booda sa'aatii 2 irraa jalqabuun sagantaa tumsaa OMN fi marii hawaasaa qopheessanii isin eegaati jiru.
Deeggarsa miidiyaa walabaa fi sagalee cunqurfamtoota OMN marii hawaasaa kana irratti uummanni Oromoo Ameerikaa kutaa bulchiinsa Siyaatil daandii jiraatan martuu affeeramtanii jirtu jedhu koreen qindeessituu sagantichaa.
Keessummoonni sagantaa kana irratti argaman Daayirektarii Olaanaa OMN Dajanee Guutamaa, miseensa boordii OMN Dr. Ahmed Galchuu fi Sheek Adam Kabiraa yoo ta'an,
gaazexeessitoota gameeyyii OMN Asiyaa Muhammad, Tasfaayaa Aminaa fi Mahadii Junaydii sagantaa tumsa miidiyaa walabaa fi marii uummataa kana irratti ni argamu.
Teessoon teenya 3515 S Alaska Street, Seattle.
Odeeffannoo dabalataatiif lakkoofsa bilbilaa kanaan koree qindeessituu sagantichaa dubbisuu dandeessu.
OMN utubuun sabboonummaa Oromoo utubuudha.
Koree qindeessituu sagantichaa Siyaatil USA.
OMN Kaleeshalle akarrattu ndoofte dhugaa qabda.
From February this year, we have been bringing you content in the English language that has been covering the political, social, and economic realities of Ethiopia and the wider Horn region. We have had the pleasure of bringing you thought-provoking analysis and powerful stories to help us better understand the issues our region faces and what steps can be taken to solve these issues. As we continue to produce this content on our show OMN Insights, we're also excited to announce that we will be bringing you bi-weekly news bulletins in the English language. This means that we will now be airing a total of 3 English segments a week on the Oromia Media Network. I want to encourage you to tune in wherever it is you watch OMN content on Tuesdays and Thursdays for our news bulletins, and continue to watch and share our weekly program OMN Insight, hosted by me, Soreti Kadir. If you want to support our work through sponsorship, I also encourage you to get in touch with our team.